Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monday, May 19th, 2025 City Council meeting. I will first await a motion to leave the non-public and seal the minutes of the non-public session.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Mayor McCachran,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Counselor Tabor,
Present?
Counselor Cook,
Here.
Counselor Denton,
Here.
Counselor Blaylock,
Present?
Counselor Bagley,
Here.
Counselor Moreau,
Here.
Counselor Lombardi.
Here.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to go out of order. Oh, no, we're going to get there's no minutes, but under recognitions and volunteer committee reports, I'd wait a motion to suspend the rules and to bring up article or section 3 of, or number 3 of section 17 under the city manager's informational items.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Your Honor. Really excited tonight to welcome my colleague Nicole Finitzis. If you don't know her, she's the wonderful champion and engine behind the Senior Activity Center. She's joined by Ken Hale of Gather and the two groups along with the Portsmouth Housing Authority, and I don't think anyone from PHA is here this evening. They were recently selected to receive one of just 7 National Institute of Senior Centers Program of Excellence Awards. And these awards are judged by a panel of peers and affiliate members. And what they did was submit their Rock the Crock project. And the 3 entities, our senior center, the Gather, and the Portsmouth Housing Authority, worked to develop an engaging hands-on cooking lesson focusing on nutritious and appetizing meals made in a mini crock pot. And with a local foundation grant and assistance from Gather, attendees get to enjoy the meal together, leave with their own crock pot or recipe book, a $25 gift card to a local grocery store, and an apron. And this really helps to teach, in addition to teaching cooking, it helps to teach the PHA residents how to utilize our local transportation program. So kudos to the 3 groups for getting together and Nicole for hosting it, and thanks for the opportunity to give them kudos.
Nicole, would you like to say a few words, or Ken, not to be put on the spot? Ken, you're always loquacious. That's your arm.
We're honored for this.
Oh, do you mind, just so the folks at home can hear you too, on Channel 22? Just come into the microphone right there at the podium.
We're honored to be recognized for this. We're serving people with food, a lesson, recipe, and a gift, and also the gift of socialization, which is very important for the seniors that this program is geared towards.
Yes, and I think this was just an idea that came to mind between our 3 organizations that really took off. And it's really shined a light on the collaboration of our 3 efforts across our organizations. And it's done exactly what I was hoping it would do, which has brought Housing, Gather, and the Senior Center all together and exposed all those seniors to all the more services and how we all work together. So it's been a great project and effort.
Well, Ken and Nicole, thank you on behalf of everyone. And City Manager said it best, but you guys are, you've done a lot. And I was speaking with former Councilor Petra Huda, who I'm going to embarrass now, but she was volunteering at as a tax preparer at the Senior Center, and remarking just how amazing that facility is, and that you've grown to make it so much more connected into the community. I hope you do the children's ice cream social again
Yes.
this
It's on the
year.
calendar,
And there's just so many ways to connect, and all the stories that exist there. And for every time that we have a luncheon or gathering, making sure that, as folks even move away from Portsmouth, that they're invited to come, and that we're bigger than our borders, certainly as Gather shows, that, collectively we solve some big problems. So thank you, Nicole, for all you do Ken, thank you for Gather and the PHA. I'm sure that they thought that we weren't going to move it up and they were going to come in here around 10:30 and be a part of this. But thank you to the PHA again as well, and just kudos to you guys. Congrats.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have public comment. Now, only saw 3 on here. If you, not to be confused, public comment with the public hearing. The public hearing on the budget is right after the first reading of ordinances. So if you would like to speak on that, this one is limited to 3 minutes. The other one is only limited by how effective you think your comments are and the time of which you want to make them. But first up, we have Irish Mike on elected officials.
Some pictures first I'd like to pass out, if I may. The party, and you can pass, I think there's one for each party. Good evening, Mayor. Michael Harn, Orchard Street. Basically, what happened a year ago spring with the graffiti and everything downtown, elected officials, they should be held to a higher standard than a general citizen. And as a city employee, be it fire, police, or city council, you're basically a city employee. You're regardless what you're getting, you're still getting a stipend for the work you're doing. So basically, you're a city employee, and like city requirements, held to a higher standards. When you're a city official, there should be no bullying, no neglect towards visitors or residents. It's not acceptable. No threatening or bullying. It should be grounds for immediate discharge, and should not engage in any political activity. Like I don't know when it was, 2 years ago, there's passed an ordinance. If there's any protests downtown, you can't lean up anything against city property. The city manager came down there and she addressed Mark one time about having stuff lent up against city property and what not occupy seats. Since that ordinance passed, every week that ordinance has been violated downtown. Councillor Bagley has been down there. He witnessed, and these Councillor Bagley's words, he said, "I sat there in the square and I observed the protesters. They seemed peaceful and didn't break any laws." This after him voting on a law where you can't lean anything against city property that was violated. And the protest, the hands-off protest, or whatever the protest was 2 weeks ago, the actions of the Councillor Denton is shameful, disrespectful, and he should be removed. He should be removed from City Council. That's. I'm not going to show it. That's not the image I want to. Mayor, you have kids, and I know a couple of the other councillors have kids. That's not the image of a representative of the city. That's not the image I want to see, regardless of how you feel, how your political beliefs is. When you're elected official, you're for all the people. The people of Portsmouth are not just Republicans, Democrats, and Independent. You're not just for one side or other side. You're for all the people, and you should be held in a high regard, and he should be removed from the City Council for those shameful and disrespectful actions.
Thank you, Irish Mike.
Thank you.
Next up is Roy Helsel on taxes and developers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Roy Helsel. I'm from Portsmouth. Well, from what I've read so far, the city has raised property taxes but did not raise them property taxes equally. Homeowners' taxes went up, but commercial property taxes went down. The majority of the commercial property owners are investors and do not live in the city or the state, a lot of them. So the residents of Portsmouth property owners were not treated equally and are burdened with majority of the city taxes. Why? Then the developer of the Newberry building is getting the okay by the city to rebuild the building into shared housing units and are only required to lease or rent them at a 30-day period at a time. This is like a barracks or a flop house in the center of our town. People will be in and out of there like revolving doors. This is my understanding from what I have read so far. The minimum lease of renting should be at least 6 months or a year requirements set by the city, or this will be a flop house. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next up is Brian French, member of the school board on the school budget.
I'm going to speak during the.
Oh, the public hearing? All right.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Mayor, we have one hand on
One
Zoom.
hand on Zoom.
Kate, do you wish to speak about public comment or the budget hearing?
I'll speak during public comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, you might, okay, so I think Kate meant she's going to speak at the public hearing.
okay.
Anybody else would like to
No,
speak?
I don't. No.
Oh, you do? Okay, you went on mute, but, okay.
I want to speak now.
Okay. Kate, take it away.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Kate Hayden, 1 Ash Street. And I just wanted to express some current concerns that I have about the budget as it relates to the schools. As a resident with school-age kids, I just can't understand how capping the total budget at a 2.9% increase won't hurt the schools, teachers, and our children. Nobody likes it when taxes increase, but equally true, nobody likes it when services are cut. From what I understand, this cap would mean a reduction in staff and services. Yes, some teachers took the buyouts. Great, that helps with the bottom line, but then it creates new problems. It means that fewer services will be provided for our children. It also means bigger class sizes at some of the schools for a variety of courses. Costs have gone up for contracts, salaries, supplies, special ed services, really for everything. So it's unacceptable to penalize those working in the schools and attending the schools for these cost increases. Saying they should go with less just isn't the way to go here. For me, such potential significant cuts to the school department are just not okay. Our schools need more support than ever. Teachers need to know they're valued and supported by our city. And I don't think this budget does that. This potential cut could come at a great cost, not only to our students and teachers, but to the community as a whole. Teachers will leave, families will find other schools, and will be even worse off than before. Portsmouth schools used to be sought after. I fear that's no longer the case. Please reconsider this proposed cap for the school department. We need to invest in the education of the youth in our community and demonstrate to the teachers and staff how much we value them. I hope that as our elected officials, you come up with another plan for the school department budget and prioritize the students in our city. Send us a message that you value education. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Any other speakers that would like to sign up now? All right, we are going on to the first reading of ordinance. First reading of ordinance amendment to Chapter 10 zoning ordinance, City of Portsmouth zoning map to be amended to rezone parcels described on the city's tax map 125, lot 16, tax map 138, lot 16, tax map 138, lot 62, and a portion of tax map 138, lot 63 from Character District 5, CD5 to Character District 4W, CD4W, to rezone a portion of tax map 138, lot 63 from Character District 5, CD5 to Character District L1, CD4 L1, to change the boundary of the North End Incentive Overlay Neoid and to amend the boundary of the Downtown Overlay District DOD to align with the amended North End Incentive Overlay District Neoid, and to amend the building heights in the North End Incentive Overlay District from 2 to 4 stories, 50 feet, to 2 to 3 stories, 40 feet for parcels described on the city's tax map 125, lot 16, tax map 138, Lot 62, and Tax Map 125, Lot 14. The zoning maps to be amended and reissued to incorporate these amendments pursuant to the city's zoning ordinance at Chapter 10, Article 4, Zoning and District Use Regulations, Section 10.421, District Location and Boundaries, Section 10.421.10, and Chapter 10, Article 5, Character-Based Zoning, Section 10.5A21.10, Content of Regulation Map 10.5A21A, Character Districts and Civic Districts, and Map 10.5A21B, Building Height Standards. Zoning maps that depict the existing conditions and these amendments will be available at second reading.
Your Honor, I would move to pass first reading and hold a public hearing and second reading at the June 9th, 2025 City Council meeting.
Second?
And if just, are you going to explain that, even though our zoning is so simple, but are you going to just speak to what this is actually doing?
Actually, I have an amendment for
Oh, my God.
You're going to love it. And I will explain the amendment after I make my motion. I'd like to move to amend the building height made to adjust along Rock Street right-of-way to reflect the city's subdivision approved by the planning board last Thursday, May 15th, 2025, and to correct the North End Incentive Overlay District proposed boundary.
Second?
And what this is doing is because we are trying to line up the downtown overlay district with the North End Incentive Overlay District, and with that subdivision happening, we just wanted to have that corner that follow Rock Street. So that it's convoluted the way that it was laid, so they just want to adjust it so that it follows the new subdivision plan. And that's what that amendment is about. It's just making sure it follows the edge of Rock Street.
Okay. And is there, I guess, from a neighborhood perspective, is this something that's in line with the expectations of the neighbor? Well, we'll find out at the second reading if we
We will.
pass this. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Councilor Moreau?
Nope, just we'll vote on the amendment
Yep.
first.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Councilor Moreau, anything?
Do you
further?
want more explanation for the rest of it? I mean, there will be a
So
presentation and
just,
more.
I mean, I know that this, I mean, I joke in terms of like, this is super easy to understand for everybody, but that
It's-
this is specifically talking about the zoning that was left off. There were zoning changes proposed, COVID happened, they didn't happen, and then we're correcting that, even though the planning board, and well-intentioned, but said that we'll pick this up in the master plan. As a council, we feel strongly that we want to make sure that what was said was going to happen happens before the master plan begins.
Correct, with some slight changes that were neighborhood requested regarding going from the recommended by staff of CD4 to CD4W.
Okay.
And that was the only additional change. But we definitely, there's information in the packet. I talked about it the last time as well, but we can definitely talk about it more at second reading.
All right. No further discussion, all in Councilor Tabor, always at the last minute. I was about to say vote.
No, I just wanted to ask Councilor Moreau, by voting this amendment, do we eliminate the rezoning creating some non-compliance?
No,
No, we still have that along.
no, it's just basically showing exactly what the line will lie, where that line will go. And it basically was in that general area, but they just wanted to now follow the subdivision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor,
No.
to linger
I
there.
was-
It's a bad habit.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that is now scheduled for the June 9th. Okay, and so now we're on to the public hearing on the budget. The presentation was already, are there any council questions before we open up the public hearing? Councilor Tabor.
Yes, I had a question for the city manager. We have teachers' contracts and library staff contracts to approve. If we approve those, do we stay within the collective bargaining contingency of 1.99?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And so these contracts, so like the numbers are now in the contract, so maybe just before we get started on the public hearing, if Nathan could Nathan, are you here? Of course you're here. So, Deputy City Manager, Deputy City Manager for Finance?
Correct. Finance and Administration.
Finance Administration. Only a year into it, Nathan. I got it. So would you mind speaking to what these effects will have? I know that not all of the collective bargaining is done as it relates to education, but can you speak to the city manager's budget, and then as it pertains to the budget that is will now incorporate the school budget that will now incorporate this collective bargaining contingency that was previously set aside in collective bargaining contingency that will now be a part of this school department increase? You're getting your computer, which means you got some numbers.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. It has been impressed upon me by the Human Resources Department and our chief negotiator that it's important that I not spill the beans, as it were, too greatly about the estimates and the calculations that we have made to put together the budget, because we are in negotiations with multiple entities, our unions. Two of them are before you tonight. I guess it's reasonable that as we get ready to ratify those, as you consider those, we could talk about those costs. I will work in very broad strokes and suggest that the Teachers Association, our estimates right now are somewhere approximately $900,000 for that collective bargaining agreement. The library employees contract for this year is somewhere to the tune of $34,000. Those two both fit inside the $1.99 million set aside. We still have confidence and fully expect that all negotiations, when settled, could settle within that dollar amount. Obviously, you've experienced it before. If for any reason our estimates are incorrect, we'd have to come back to you to talk about supplemental to try to deal with any excess there. I think one of the useful tidbits that the mayor maybe was asking for was, given that decision tonight, what would that do within our budget? Obviously, if I understand the question, what you're looking for, what we do subsequent to this is we verify all of the numbers again. We make sure that we understand, in the case of the teachers, all of the teacher contracts that need to be impacted, and then ultimately, with an approved budget after the 1st of July, the city would transfer dollars from the contingency for collective bargaining to the departments impacted. In this case, the school department, to address teacher line items, the accounts in their budget that fund teacher salaries, as well as the taxes and retirement costs that go along with it. And likewise, we would be adjusting from the contingency into the library department to make adjustments for library employees. I think I can tell you that the school budget is proposed in the collective bargaining right now with an increase of $1.85 million. Obviously, if you add $900,000 to that, that would be $2.75 million. And it would certainly, it would change is that what you're looking for, Mayor?
Yeah, so,
Go there.
well, and we do this all live, so I didn't tell you about this question before. Just trying to get a sense that, we have, as a matter of, when we asked for 2.9% guidance of all the departments and the school department, and looking at and understanding that the out-of-district placements were certainly a cost that were unexpected, and we didn't necessarily have, contingency for that. We, as a council, or as the budget was being prepared, said that, okay, we're going to set those aside, and without that, we would still like to see 2.9%. If we added that back in, we'd be at a number, much higher than 2.9%, somewhere closer to 4%.
So right now, if you take the 1.85 million that's proposed in the city manager's budget, which includes the special ed out-of-district impact that we were discussing, and you add to that the $900,000 estimated right now for the collective bargaining for the teachers, that would put you at 2.75 million, which would be a 4.3% increase year over year in the school department.
Right, and that's with the city manager's budget.
That's in the city
And so if
manager's
we
budget.
asked, and the school board came in with a different budget, and we have some to speak to that tonight, but if that proposed budget was put forth, that would be an additional 600,000.
689,000 is the difference between the city manager's budget and the school board's recommended budget. And if I do the math out, that would, if that was in the city manager's budget, that extra 689,000, it would raise the city's total budget to is that on the screen, Nathan?
It must, yeah, it's tough for, guys that don't deal in math to
Okay,
ask questions with these details. But I guess the gist that I'm trying to, in terms of a 2.9% with the added district placements, the goal is to make sure that we're, being as mindful as possible, understanding, separating those out, to still try to get to 2.9% with collective bargaining. This can be somewhat confusing because we keep that collective bargaining as an aside from the actual budget while we're doing this, so that the unions can negotiate in good faith. But since it's before us tonight in a dollar amount that we can approve or disapprove, this speaks to the actual dollar amounts. Forgetting the other contracts that exist out there for the teachers that don't make up as quite a big a sum as the teacher's contract for education.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we're at.
I'm going to tell you that we're at 347 right now
347 right now.
as a total budget. If we added the $689,000 that the school board had considered as an additional, it would take the total city budget to 3.95%.
Okay.
If we add the $689,000 to the school budget, it would bring that to a 5.37% year over year, standing alone. And that number would include the 1.85 plus the school board 689,000, and it would include the 900,000 we're considering tonight. You would have to adjust at some point because there's also contingency left for the other remaining
Right, so
4
there would be
units.
more money.
That's
so
more money that would add to that.
That'd be a floor. Okay, all right. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions of the council? Councilor Bagley?
Sorry, I have
For
a question
Nathan,
for
oh,
Nathan.
can't go home. He was just like, I made it.
And I apologize, but this discussion made me think of a question, so I'm going to ask you to do math on the fly, and maybe if you came back with an answer at a later date, that would be okay. The 689,188 that we were just talking about for the school board, what would that be in mill rate terms, cents per thousand?
So today, the tax base is about 10 billion, almost 10,078. So roughly every $101,000 is worth a penny on the rate. So this is almost 7 of those 101s. So I would tell you that it's approximately, in today's valuation, it's 7 cents a
Okay.
thousand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I had a question actually for Zach on the, and this is for the focus on special education funding, and it's prompted by something that I did not know until it was pointed out to me in this budget process, that when a student goes to a private school, say to like St. Pat's, and correct me if I'm wrong if this information is incorrect, we as a community continue to cover the special education needs of that student at that new school.
That's correct.
As long as they're a Portsmouth resident.
If the student is receiving an education here, I'll need to get back to you on the specifics of and I should know, But we definitely do contribute. St. Pat's is the one example for us, and we do contribute special education funds. We're a pass-through to St. Pat's, and we work with St. Pat's in order to make sure that those kids receive funding around their special education needs.
Okay, and so that's, and then I guess this prompted the question for me. With our area agreement, do we specifically receive funds? I know that we receive tuitions from communities, but do we receive funds from sending communities in the SAU 50 for special education? Do those dollars follow the student?
So my understanding is that it's evolved over time. So at one point, what happened, and this is historically what happened, was we would charge those communities a tuition rate, and we would separate out special education funding as a separate thing. That doesn't occur anymore and has not happened for years. And so what happens is we charge a tuition rate. If the student is in our schools and receiving special education services, then that is built into the tuition. But if the student is, let's say it's a student from Newcastle or Newington or Greenland, and they go out of district to a placement, then SAU 50, then we step out of the equation. SAU 50 coordinates that relationship with the outside entity and then pays the bill.
Okay, and so I guess what I'm trying to get to is that, so we used to do it that way, and maybe there's an efficiency to do it this way, and it makes sense. Do we have numbers in terms of, and now I don't want to like get too into the weeds in terms of like what can be shared and what cannot be shared with that, but do we have numbers in terms of, you know, I know one of the requests was paraeducators under the budget that was passed by the school board. Do we have a list of a list of students receiving or on an IEP that is receiving a paraeducator from the districts outside of SAU 52, meaning SAU 50.
And depending on what entry point they are, what grade level students come in.
Sure.
We don't, I think one of the challenges, we can try to produce something that gives you an approximate, but a lot of our paraeducators are not one-to-one paraeducators. They're working with multiple kids. So some of those kids, and I think this is probably part of why the funding mechanism changed, is that as we schedule people to work around a variety of needs, you might, if you're a para, you might be one period working with 2 or 3 kids in a class. One of those kids might be from Portsmouth, one might be from Rye, one might be from Newcastle. Then you're moving down the hallway, and now you're in a different class, and now you've got 1 or 2 students, and again, it's some mix of those folks. I wasn't here for when that decision was made to turn things over. It's been a while, but my guess is it became too hard to track how we are utilizing those people, and then to invoice it back and do that work. So, again, that's just me based on some stories that I've heard. But
Okay, that's helpful. Answered the question.
Right.
All right, thanks, Zach.
Yep.
Or Superintendent McLaughlin. Any other questions of the council before we get started with the public hearing? And Kelly, you're going to stop me if I try to close the public
I
hearing.
will.
You're going to just jump over here, grab the gavel out of my hands, make sure we don't do that. All right. With that, I will open the public hearing. Please come up and state your name and unlimited amount of time to talk, but brevity is also an effective form of persuasion.
If you're on Zoom and you wish to speak, please raise your virtual hand.
Good evening, Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. Mayor, thank you for asking my questions for me. I come to you tonight because in the last 3.5 years, you folks have added 32.5 positions, and you have increased the budget 23.5 million. 1 million of that this year has been spoken about quite a bit, and that's the special ed out of district. I've talked at every public budget session. So it comes no surprise that that is a concern. I've shared that, and I won't go into a lot of detail tonight. But what I'd like to talk about tonight is revenue. I feel bad, and I want to thank everyone, all the departments for being here tonight, but I really feel bad for them. In my school district, as a director of student service, I know what revenue I'm bringing in. I get credit from my school board and my selectmen for bringing in all the revenue and doing all the work to bring it in. That motivates my staff to really want to bring as much revenue, knowing it's a lot of work, into our school district. And I thank the Guilford Selectmen, I thank the town of Guilford, and I thank the town school board, because they do give us credit. These folks are doing a lot of things. And I think the only way we're going to offset the fact that residents are paying more than commercial is through our revenue stream. And we really need to start thinking about what happens when our fire company goes and supports another community. In the North Country and in the Lakes region, they are happening. They're charging for that. We need to start thinking about how we charge for all the work our police officers are doing for the state of New Hampshire. We have some of the top equipment. I heard from one of the small communities that abut us, Portsmouth has all the great toys. We have a lot of very expensive equipment that we keep upgrade with technology, with making sure it's all serviceable. And we need to start charging other communities that we are supporting. I know it's great to be a good neighbor, but how much longer can we afford to be a good neighbor? I think just the fact that we have the equipment and it's available to them makes us a good neighbor. But I do believe it's time to start charging for the amount of employees involved. I believe it's time to start charging for the fuel to go to the neighborhood or to our neighbors. And I believe it's time to start charging for all the training that our police and fire departments are doing. Because there's a lot of training going on to keep up and do all the internet detection that I hear every once in a while on WMUR that the Portsmouth Police Department has founded. It's time that other communities start paying back for what we are giving them. In our schools, I actually shared with Mayor last Monday, that I found it very interesting that we aren't charging for paras if a child comes into our district with a para-educator. And I can tell you, as a district that has a sending district, I agree with the superintendent. It might take a little time, but every one of those IEPs tell you exactly how much time a para-educator is that we have to provide. It might be 5 hours, it might be 6 hours. So we can charge for that. And I find it interesting that we're not. I also find it very interesting that we are not charging for some significant special needs services, like occupational therapy, physical therapy. Again, as a district that sends into my district, we charge. And my real concern is, by listening to the superintendent tonight, if we're worried about charging a district, then I guess my question is, are we charging for foster care students? In the state of New Hampshire, if a child is taken out of another district and it comes into your district, into a foster home, that district can charge special ed services to the sending district. So there's a lot of revenues here, folks. we need to start collecting. And we need to start really thinking about what we're giving away. We can no longer give away zoning. We can no longer give away and making it reasonable for people. They're going to make a lot of money off of projects, give them free rides to our planning department. We can no longer give away free land to members. We need to think about it, because right now, our community, there's quite a few here that if we want them to stay, which I hope we do, we need to keep our taxes lower. Right now, if you're a renter in our city and you put this tax burden on landlords, they will up the rent. And you will no longer have that person in our community. And we will not have sustainable rents. So I don't care if you're talking about the homeowner or a landlord. Your 30 or 23.5 million is affecting people. And you need to come up with a plan to stop it. And I think one of the big things you could do is celebrate all the work our fine people behind me are doing, pull in some revenues, give them credit. Just don't send it to the city coffers. It should be a line item in their budgets so they can get credit for their revenue, and celebrate and ask them to work really hard and bring in those revenues into our community. When that fireboat goes out, we should be charging the community that needs to utilize it. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any other speakers on the budget?
Peter Huda, 280 South Street. So tonight I do have handouts for the council and the city manager.
3 reminders.
I'm only going to give them to you one at a time because I know you'll look at them before you should. First handout I'm going to give you is based on the 2024 CAFR. It's the FTEs by function. When I started looking at for efficiencies, I wanted to know who has the largest number of FTEs, what department by function. And I tried to match what the org charts in the budget book had. So what I have done for you is the first data that I pulled was from the CAFR, and it was from page 154, and it's by function. And it's the CAFR had data from 2015 to 2024. I updated it with 25 and 26, which is in the budget book on pages 181 or 182, something like that. And then I have the total in here. So that's the first thing I'm going to
Oh, yeah, we can pass it.
Thank you.
So that's a little farther down in my comments here, so I'm going to get started on what I have to say. So, as Esther said, the City Council budget increased in the last 4 years from FY22 at 1.26.4 million to this year's request of 1.149.9, a 23.5 million increase. See, you guys are reading it already. I knew it. The actual spend, now I'm going to talk about this because this is what is important to run the city. So the actual spend on page 9 is has increased by $12 million. And this is from last June, so the request is $12 million more to run the city in FY26 than you actually had spent in FY24. So first thing I'd like to address is some comments on the budget presentations last week. I thought they were very well done. Being a numbers person, I missed out on some of the numbers. So the thing I'd like to comment on, the presentations did not give the required comparative columns required by RSA 32, 5, 3, and 4. And basically, that requires budget form shall include recommended appropriations, comparative columns indicating at least the following information. Appropriations voted by the previous annual meeting, prior year, actual expenditures for those appropriations, and anticipated appropriations. So it was very hard for a resident to compare what happened in FY24 to what is being requested in FY26. And I would also note that we were definitely lacking the difference in percentage on a lot of areas. The other thing I would like to address is the same thing happened when we went to, Esther and I went to the earlier meetings, especially on police and school. And it was a little hard for residents or anybody else to discuss what was going on in the school budget because it was not published and out there. There were a few people, especially on the school board, and parents that questioned what was in there and what was going to happen by the other presentations that were given. The base budget was in there at 4.99% for everybody to see and read, but any changes from that were not published. Okay, so now I'd like to go. Well, the reason I gave you the org charts and the number of employees, I'm going to go through and told you how I went about looking for efficiencies as requested by the city manager and the mayor. So what I did was I took this report because I wanted to know how many people that we had. On the bottom of that report, in the summary, you can tell what percentage of the employees was the highest next to school. And I would call your attention to the public works area. That if you add the full-time equivalents, which was in the book, and you add the part-time, which was in the book and not totaled, this is what the ending total would be. So what I was looking for was the largest area to focus on for opportunities to find efficiencies. So basically, I was looking at where we can go to find these. So what can we learn from the closest municipal neighbors of ours? So I looked at the population and service area because this was a public works function. So in doing that, I reviewed Durham, Dover, Exeter, Keene, and Rochester in search of possible efficiencies that Portsmouth might be able to use. Nothing jumped out at me with the smaller populations in Keene, Exeter, or Durham. Then I looked at Rochester and Dover, both with larger populations, and Dover was the closest in structure and area to our public works function. Even though they do have approximately 12,000 more residents, I was expecting a larger budget, and I was surprised at what I found. Next, I will give you a comparison of what I found for your information, and we could talk about that. So I will kind of narrate for people who don't have any view onto this. What I handed out was the groups in Dover that make up the community services area. The community services area in Dover is like the public works area and in Portsmouth. And what I handed out was what's included and what areas we have. So I'll wait till.
We're short a couple, teacher.
Can we share?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the folks at home, what I handed out was the Community Services budget, FY26, because it's available online, for Dover. Dover has 15 cost centers, and Dover's budget for basically the same services that we have included in Public Works for FY25 approved was $34,064,185. For 26, it was $35,286,306. So Dover had an increase of 3.59 in their budget, Public Works budget for FY26. And if you look at Portsmouth, I think it's quite revealing, and I think I gave all my stuff to you guys. But the other thing that was interesting in the budget presentations that I picked up on last week was all of general fund areas were held somewhere around the 2.97. But if you look at the page with all the numbers on and all the colors, and then you look at the end column, I compared the FY25, FY26, and this is all the areas that are included in Public Works. And if I remember right, the Public Works itself, which is in the general fund, went up about 1%, almost 2%. Water, sewer, and parking, and I will tell you, because I know Karen's going to check all the numbers, I will tell you that I pulled the capital projects out of the parking because it was not in any other area, and I was only looking at the expenses to run the departments. Everything else should tie to the budget book, and I could give you pages, City Manager. So basically, I found that very interesting that all of these areas had increased way above what the other departments were able to increase. So I guess the question is, why? And based on what I've found, I'm hoping that you take the opportunity to look at what I'm going to go over with you on this and the comparison between Dover and our areas. So based on what we see in there, and I won't even go and look at the total because you can see it there. It's quite a bit more. At the bottom of the page of all across from, look at 25 and 26, it's almost $20 million more, including all our areas. So this is what I looked at, and I look for efficiencies or something we can glean from them to try to get efficiencies in running our Public Works area. So I already went over Dover has 15, Portsmouth has approximately 56 cost centers or departments underneath them. First question there, do we have room for consolidation? When looking at facilities, they have 1 or 2, we have 7. In looking at engineering, we have 4 departments, and we are having a bit of department creep into trees and greenery with engineering at 15,500. Yes, I did find it, Peter. And I would ask you, Dover has 1. Can we find efficiencies and consolidate there? We have a department, we have line items in every one of the silos in here. We have a line item for vehicle repairs, and we also have a line item that's kind of new coming forward of vehicle repairs by outsider in each public works function departments. We also have it in school, fire, and police. Question there: can we find efficiencies? Can we look at consolidating anything? I understand they have special needs, but I want you to hear what I'm going to tell you next. Dover has a fleet maintenance fund, and it brings in revenue from the outside. And I'm pulling this from the actual Dover description. Division is Fleet Maintenance Fund. Their mission is to provide accurate and efficient maintenance to repair city vehicles and equipment, as well as certain local and regional outside entities. So their major responsibilities are for the maintenance and repair of 451 city and non-city vehicles, heavy trucks, and small equipment. This includes city-related departments such as engineering, water, sewer, cemetery, recreation, facilities and grounds, inspection, assessing, Dover Police Department, and School Department. That's why I asked that question. It also includes outside entities in Stratford County Sheriff's Department, UNH Police Department, Durham Police Department, Dover Housing Authority, Rollingsford Police Department, Kittery Wastewater, and Newmarket Housing Authority. They also maintain and repair equipment during snow and ice emergencies, which we have a very large amount also in our budget for that. So the question is, can we do something like this? This brings in revenue. This is it's a internal fund that each department is charged according to what they use, and it's also an external fund that brings in revenue and holds this. So that was the first interesting thing I saw, that maybe we could find efficiencies there and also generate some revenue with the staff that we currently have. The other thing that I would like to add, even looking at this on the same subject, is can the rolling stock be combined into a rolling stock pool in Portsmouth? And looking at Dover and Rochester and some of the other departments, even though they were smaller, they were pooling and they weren't putting money into each one of the silos for rolling stock. So, and from my history, I could bring forward to you that the pooling of vehicles by different departments helps eliminate city vehicles sitting idle in lots when somebody else could be using it, if it's just assigned to one person. The next thing I guess I would look at, in looking at the ratios and on your sheet of the FTEs, I compared the FTEs that were in the Public Works Department and the total to Dover. So the thing I would bring to your attention here is that the FTEs for Dover were 78.06 for FY25 and 79.06 for FY26. Portsmouth for 25 had 201.51. This is according to your reports. And for 26, we had 205.91. Not a large increase, but you can see the difference here. So that's some of the things that I think we could look at for efficiencies and look at for combining areas. The other thing I would like to bring to your attention, and I know this isn't the job of the council, but I would like to ask if the combination of manager to worker ratios has been looked at in all of these areas, especially in Public Works. When I started looking at some of the departments that are moving in high-level or management positions, the ratio of workers to managers is very high. So I would also ask you to look at that and ask if that could be allocated differently, or some of the FTEs could be used in different places. So, in ending, this is the first thing I would bring forward to you. I'm looking forward to a response, and I think some of these efficiencies can be looked at. I think it's very interesting that the fleet management staff can also bring in money, and as far as the amount of workforce that we have in different areas, I would ask if we would look at combining the all the maintenance, the custodial, and all the other stuff. We do use it in different areas, but we have a cost center which is collecting dollars in each one. So if you would need any of my backup for this or have any questions, I would be happy to help. I have all the stuff. This is only a summary. So I'm hoping that you would look at this. And that was my promise, and I think I fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other speakers? Now, it doesn't have to be limited to this year's budget, but if you want to focus on this year's budget, we'll appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Noveline Clayberg. I live at 405 FW Hartford Drive. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak about the upcoming school budget. Because we had employees take advantage of the buyout option that was presented, we were able to restructure and redesign the services for our students. For example, we will now have a K-12 director of counseling to ensure emotional wellness and well-being for our students. This position will oversee counseling programming to ensure that our students are effectively being served. As you know, there has been recent tragic incidents in our community involving serious mental health issues among our youth. We continue to blame COVID for some of the mental health decline with our young people. And we can also talk about the presence and pressure of social media on our kids. I and many of you did not have this detrimental element when we were growing up. It's a new world today. It is a strong reality, and our school district feels that this is of vital importance. To assist with this, we have increased our high school we have increased positions in our high school to full-time, a move that we wanted to make for several years now. This person, I'm sorry, I got a little mixed up here. Our nurse, I'm talking about our nurse. This is a position that we wanted to increase to full-time for many years. This person will not only help with the mental health issues of our kids, but also the physical issues that come with teenage years. We're adding 3 para-educators to the Portsmouth Early Education Program, and this will assist with the increased number of students coming into our preschool program. PEEP students require additional services, and starting at this young age, we can hopefully ease the load of special education services that these students may require as they grow. The new intensive needs elementary teacher will provide that program as the PEEP students advance. We will bring back the kids program at Portsmouth Middle School, which will work toward decreasing the out-of-district numbers. This program was successful in the past, and we are optimistic that good results will happen again. Another very important addition is our second social worker in our school district. This person will work closely with families to make sure that services are being provided. These positions and a few more add to the bottom line of our budget, as you all know. However, the school board and our administrators truly believe that efficiencies will result in a more efficient delivery of services will happen. And I just want to say again, I said it last week, the board deliberated long and hard to deliver this budget, and I know it sounds corny, but our hearts and souls are really in it. And I just wanted to address the mayor's question about the contingency. As many of you know, I've been involved for a long time, and it's always been my understanding that a contingency fund is built into the city budget to handle current union negotiations. Each department was not individually charged for this. Maybe I'm wrong, I could be, but that's how I always understood it. So when you have union negotiations going on, whatever the result of those negotiations is does not affect that particular department's budget. Again, I could be wrong, but that's how I always understood it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Brian French, 255 FW Hartford Drive. Yeah, thanks for all the time you guys put in. It's a lot of work. I know you do a lot of work behind the scenes, and it's a lot to support the city, but grateful that we have you guys, and grateful that you support the school board and the schools as well. A little bit about me. Most people know that I've actually been on the school board. This is my 8th year. I'm actually serving as the vice chair this year, and I really joined the school board to support the schools. I have 3 kids in the district, and I was a big beneficiary of having equitable education as a child. That gave me the experiences and also the set me up for life in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise had if I didn't have some caring teachers. So it was really important to me that, if I was going to serve my community, it would be in the school in the school board. And I want to, a lot of the principles that the school board stands for, you guys all support, and it's equitable education, wellness, health and wellness, especially mental health that we talk about a lot. And those are the pillars that, that I came in with, and I support, and I know that most of you support that. Well, I think you all support that. And as you know, Portsmouth actually has really have historically had the best top 20 schools in New Hampshire consistently. We've had, I think, 1 blue ribbon school with New Franklin in 2020, which means they, just were, it's from the Department of Education. It's really the highest award you can get. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because it's intentional. And it happens because you guys, we all have a commitment to our community to spend money, obviously responsibly, but also we want to have good schools. And I know that's a double-edged sword because it increases all our property values, but people want to come here, and especially families, when they're attracted here, are because of the schools. So, talking about the budget, as Nancy mentioned, we really did talk and think long and hard about what we were trying to do. We wanted to be responsible, but we also, we want to serve the kids on those pillars we just talked about. And we landed at a number, it's not the number that you have before you, but it's a little bit higher. But the reality is anything lower than 4% is a reduction in services. So, and reduction in headcount, and that's the reality. So when we had the early retirement, it was a reduction in headcount, and to keep that 2.9% is really reducing the services that we can provide. And when we got together as a board and with the superintendent, we really said, what can we do here intentionally, smartly, supporting our strategic goals to put key positions in place that support that equitable access and education, the mental health, but also be responsible in terms of the budget. And that's what we cooked up, and that was a 3.9%. Now, I know there's contingency, and there's always been a contingency, and if the number is 5 to keep, to keep it, the services where they're at, that's the number, whatever the number is. Whatever way you skin it, it's any number lower than the either with a contingency or without, you're losing positions. And I think before people have gone through the different positions that will support the different pillars there, I won't go through each one, but I really believe in it. I voted on it, and I know you guys have had a chance to go through those positions and look at them, and want you to hopefully support our schools the way we're trying to support our schools as well. And I know you guys have to deal with a double-edged sword with this stuff. I know there was questions about class sizes, especially in the high school. I will say our kids really enjoy having access to many types of classes, which you cannot have if you get rid of teachers and make the class sizes bigger. You just don't have the same opportunities. You can't have like a social studies teacher teaching advanced calculus. Just can't be done. So you have to kind of work in that. So, you're getting rid of choice for a lot of these kids. And if you talk to these kids in the high school, that's a big plus here being here in Portsmouth. So I'm not going to ramble on any further. I don't have great notes like Nancy did, but just again, the school board was very thoughtful, and we worked very hard on trying to give you guys something that tried to meet you halfway. I think we did that, and it's obviously in your hands, and thanks for all your support.
And Brian, thank you for all you do on the school board, you and Nancy. I know there's a lot that goes into the work behind the scenes, in the scenes, all of that. And as a father of one girl in the district and another one who will be joining her older sister at New Franklin very shortly, I'm appreciative of all the work that you've done to serve our community. It is greatly appreciated by all in this room, whether or not they recognize it or not. We thank you for your time on the school board and all the work you've done.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you.
Any other public speakers? And I'm not going to close it out. Okay. We got Manny coming up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, Council. My name is Manny Garganta. I live at 471 Colonial Drive. This is, hopefully it's a budget question. A while back, a vote was taken to forget the fees for PHA for Sherman School. I don't think anybody asked the question as to how much the fees were. I think that we're going to forgive $444,000 of those fees. I think they're coming forward to ask for the fees to be forgiven at the church they're doing on Lafayette Road. There's another $142,000. It's not a lot of money compared to the budget, but every little bit helps. I was always told when you plant an acorn, you can get an oak tree out of it. Well, this is a little acorn, and it seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We just gave them 5 acres of land. How much more do we have to give to get the workforce housing, which I know we need? It just doesn't make sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manny. Any other speakers on the, Roy, come on up.
Roy Helsel. And question I have, since the city's spending tax money by using our departments and other communities without charging them, and I'm retired, I'm 89 years old, maybe I'd get a tax cut. Thank you.
Roy, did you say you're 89 years old?
Yes, sir.
I don't believe that for a second. But I will take it as an opportunity to talk about our senior exemptions that anyone can go to Roseanne Lentz. And if you qualify, and then qualification means that you don't have to be quite 89, but if you have less than $500,000 in net assets outside of your home, you can qualify for a reduced valuation on your on the property, equating to less money coming through on your tax bill. Any other speakers?
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion. I move to continue the budget public hearing until Monday, June 9th, 2025.
Second?
Your Honor, Don't we have more council questions after the public hearing?
We will, yep, but we can extend it, and then we can have council questions after that. So, not seeing any hands on Zoom. Oh, wait, there's Lee Hudson. So we're gonna let Lee in, and we're just gonna hold on to that for 1 second.
Thank you for letting me speak. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear, Lee.
Yeah, thank you. So this is Lee Hudson. I live at 384 Lang Road. I am also on the school board. I did want to just speak up because I appreciated both what we said, meaning Brian and Nancy. I also appreciated what Esther said as well. One of the things I'd like to point out, because we've spoken significantly about special needs education and the cost of that. When you actually take into consideration some of the larger class sizes, that actually becomes even more challenging and more cost inefficient, unfortunately. So why we think that, hey, it's helping to increase class sizes in terms of cost, it becomes even more challenging when you think about special education and how many paras are actually required in order to help support students with disabilities. One of the things I did when I actually joined the school board was take a look at how many students there are in our student body that have disabilities, and it's it's actually above the national average, and it's 17% or actually thereabouts, and is continuing to grow. And I think we need to think about, for example, how we're actually going to end up supporting those students that actually do have IEPs and have challenges that need to be met. I do agree that we need to consider some of those costs from the perspective of, are we charging our neighboring communities that are utilizing our services in order to make sure that we make it as cost effective as possible for our citizens? So, one of the things that I also want to point out is that the number of students that actually are being supported out of district are few and far between. That number is not large. But it does cost pretty significant. And so those students that have major disabilities and severe disabilities actually do cost a lot to actually help support. And so I think, while we think that there's some quick answers, there's not. And it is pretty challenging in order to support kids that have multiple disabilities or severe disabilities, and being a dad that has a child that actually has severe disabilities. I am fully aware of what that ends up taking from a school district standpoint and what it takes us as a family from an outside of school district standpoint when the school district can't support those particular services. So just want to keep that in mind. Thank you, Conley.
Thank you very much, Lee, and for all your service on the school board as well. Appreciate that you made the time tonight to speak with us here.
Thanks, Conley.
Any other speakers? All right, we have a motion on the floor to postpone.
Continue.
Oh, to continue? Continue, not postpone. Continue, so you can, anytime. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we'll take council questions. Just do want, go to Councilor Bagley. There's a lot of numbers, teacher. We're going to crunch them as best we can. The one thing that I do think is worth pointing out, because we get compared to Dover a lot, and they have more residents, but not that many more residents. They have 11,000 more residents, so their budget of $198 million versus our budget of $149 million. It's not apples to apples there. They should pay, on our track, they should pay a lot more. They did go up, they already proposed their budget, they went up 6% this year. And I know it's boring to talk about numbers when we could be talking politics in a budget, but they went up 6%. We're trying to track right now, at least for 3.5% on a guidance of 2.9%. One thing that always gets lost, and I forget it whenever I get my tax bill, is how much we have as a part of the commercial rate here in Portsmouth. Now, commercial people still pay taxes. There's renters, commercial property, but if you're a homeowner in Dover, and I did this math just now, and I was trying to look at the latest stats, in Dover on a budget of 198. Guys, hey, pardon me, hey, can we take the conversations just out into the foyer if we're going to have them? Appreciate it. So on a 198 of Dover, 74% of their budget is paid for by residential property owners. That equates to them paying 146.52, or round up 147 million. In Portsmouth, because we have more commercial, and everybody's always like, well, what are we building this tourist community for? Why do we have, hotels and that? We pay 62% of our residents pay for the budget compared to 38% commercial. At 149, that would come out to 92 million. So comparatively, you got a delta of a Dover resident. The Dover residents comparatively are paying nearly close to, not double, but a lot closer to double than not. And so we have to keep a lot of these conversations in mind in terms of the investments that we make. That, I think all of these points that Petra had, if we can start charging more money for the actual services that we have, that's fantastic. If we started doing that and the budget started going up 6% each year, but all of it's paid for, Petra, then you're going to come here and you're going to clap. If all of that, 6%, probably not. But there's a little bit of back and forth. If we start generating more revenue, that means the budget is going up. We're just getting the revenue in, and we're accounting for that. So I do think that we should have more revenue, certainly. But our goal here and the conversations that we're trying to have is how do we be as judicious as possible with the money that we currently have. Would love to hear recommendations on where we can get revenue. But to use Dover as an example, we're going to crunch through all these numbers, but their budget 6% over a tax cap this year, and at 74% residential versus 62%. It's a big difference, and appreciate us bringing Dover into the mix when we're talking about comparing budgets. But I know there were some questions, Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. I'm going to jump right into former Councilor Huda's. She talked quite a bit about Dover. One of the things Dover does, and this is politically unpopular because I know people in Portsmouth love the trash service that we have, is they have a bag system where the 15-gallon bags are $2.34 each. The 30-gallon bags are $3.91 each. One of the things we could do is look into going to a system where we charge for the volume or the weight of trash that you throw away, so it's a little bit more equitable. The other upside to that for some of our council goals is it typically reduces the amount of trash that makes its way to the landfill because you're paying either by the volume or the weight. You have an incentive to recycle more, to compost more, and it could provide some budgetary relief. So I'm not proposing that for this year, but I do want to float that out there. I think it's a good long-term idea that we should pursue. The other thing, and I'm going to use this chance to be a proud father, my daughter, who's a product of the Portsmouth school system, just graduated high school early. She'll be marching next month with the high school graduation. If you look at the numbers from 2020 through 2024 for graduation rates in Portsmouth, you get 96.14, 96.24, 94.68, 97.3, and 95.18, which is well above the state average, which is around 88%. I think people know that Portsmouth is well regarded with the schools. Our property prices reflect that. The 2 Blue Ribbon Awards Dondero New Franklin School got recently, national awards reflect that. The great work of our teachers reflect that. And the reason I bring that up is sometimes in the budget discussion we talk about how other towns do things, and I think other towns have needs that situate them well. They might have 100 students per graduation class where we have 250 to close to 300 depending on the year. What works well in Portsmouth is proven by the results, in my opinion. And I think the idea that we should drastically change things with what we're doing with our special needs students, certainly it's worth looking at, but I don't think we need to make drastic changes. We're in a situation, steal the city manager's thunder, we just got our bond rating AAA again. The same thing with our schools. Our schools are outstanding. So we're in a situation where we have to make sure that we keep them outstanding, which is harder to do sometimes than to take an underperforming city or an underperforming school and improve it, because then you have the luxury of making drastic changes to see if you can get a better result. We have to be very cautious and careful with any changes that we make, any reductions that we make, because we have such a gold standard school system. And hearing all the talk tonight, and Manny did steal my thunder a little bit. I wasn't here for the council meeting where we waived the fees, and we're looking at waiving substantial fees again tonight. The fees that we'd be looking at waiving for PHA are in the order of $686,000. The school board is asking for $689,188. Those both work out for a medium household value of $772. If I use Director Lunny's math from earlier tonight, $54. So the school board's asking us for $54. Now, albeit that would be an ongoing cost per year, but we're also looking at waiving fees to the tune of $54 for the median household owner in our community. And I think they're both good needs in the community, affordable housing and schools. But as a counselor, I'm more inclined to leaning towards putting those $54 to the school budget.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. And again, tonight, the presentation that we'll hear later is on the Christchurch workforce housing with Hayden, I believe.
Yes, for 142.
What other questions of the council do we have? Seeing none? All right. We will move on, and thank you to everyone that came out for the budget presentation. We already did the motion. Don't have to make it again. City Manager.
Yes, thank you to the staff that stuck around, and for those that still have some items, please stick around. So first up is a request for a public hearing so that we can request your vote on a bonding resolution which would seek to repurpose bond funds previously authorized for the fit-out of the R.J. Lister Academy space at the community campus, which has come in under budget to the tune of $551,638. We're looking to redirect or reprogram or repurpose those funds to be used for district-wide school security upgrades, which would have been contemplated in an out year of the CIP. But at this time, the school would like to bring those forward with the monies that exist from that prior authorization. And Dr. McLaughlin and Brian Cisneros would be present at the June 9th public hearing and vote to speak specifically on what those upgrades might be.
Your Honor, I move to schedule a public hearing and vote on the June 9th, 2025 City Council meeting to authorize the repurposing of bond proceeds as described herein.
Second.
All in or any discussion? Councilor Blaylock?
I'm glad to see this came under budget. Does this have anything to do with the grant that was awarded part of this through?
I don't know if Lister got grant. The
was-
city
yeah.
portion of community campus got the CDFA
Okay.
grant.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, we'll have this public hearing and have the opportunity to have further questions and deliberations on that. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you. Next up is a request for approval of a tentative agreement between the city and the Association of Portsmouth Teachers. And as you can read in your packet, it's a 3-year proposal with COLA adjusting up to 2.84% in the coming year, with a floor of 3% and a ceiling of 5% in years 2 and 3 of the agreement, and an increase to health insurance premium payment of 0.75 in year 1 and 1% each in years 2 and 3.
Your Honor, I move to approve the tentative agreement with the Associations of Portsmouth Teachers as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Sister Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I would look to the city manager and the finance director, just for clarification. We are approving this contract before we've approved next year's fiscal budget. Will this now move into that budget and out of contingency fund?
Typically, as Nathan described, when we get to July 1st, the the costs associated with each collective bargaining agreement that was ratified and agreed to and approved by you will be sent to each line of the budget
Okay,
at that time, in that fiscal year.
okay.
But it's part of the planning.
Thank you.
Counselor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just, I want to thank the city management and the teachers union for this contract. I think it's a great contract in a challenging year. And I'm glad that we were able to come to an agreement.
Counselor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think this is a very appropriate contract. I'm happy to support the teachers of Portsmouth, especially as a product of Portsmouth High School and Portsmouth schools. But yeah, thank you.
Counselor Blaylock. Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I too would like to thank the teachers for working hard to get to an agreement with our administration, and I'm excited to support this agreement tonight. I do think it's important when we're talking about contingencies and budgets to understand that while this is budgeted for as part of contingency, it does become part of the overall budget. So we do have to be thinking about those percentages because that carries over to the following year. And so if we're not thinking about it as part of the budget, then the following year, the budget increase looks a lot higher for the schools because suddenly the contingency is part of the contract. So I think it's great that we have those additional percentages tonight because it really gives us a better reflection of what the budget will ultimately look like next year, going into next year's budget season.
And Counselor Cook, and picking up on that point, I think because of the out-of-district placements were a very similar number to what we had held in our heads as a potential for money going to the school department, although not a publicly disclosed part of the contingency, there can create a situation where there's this other money. And I think that we, in Portsmouth, we value education and we value teachers. And I'm glad that this budget, or this contract is passed and that the teachers can be rewarded for their willingness to negotiate. You know, there was concessions made on that in terms of health insurance. There's concessions made on the city side in terms of floor. I think that it's a fair when both feel they've given up something. But to value education, I think you also have to make sure that we are being as fiscally prudent with education costs as possible. If we're not, and the budget continues to rise, we're going to, you know, we mentioned Dover at $200 million. You know, we're not going to be far off from that if we don't talk about education costs as the largest driver. And I think we owe that to the community, but also future communities that are going to continue to need to value education. We have to be prudent with that so that continuing investment in education is something that we believe strongly in Portsmouth and will continue to be. As I'm looking out and see Manny certainly made contributions to education throughout his life here. I know my parents have. I plan to. My kids plan to. And having that sense where we are going to continually invest in education, that means because we're still around to be able to do so because we're able to control costs the best we can. So that's where the focus, not just because it's 60% of the increase of the budget this year, but because I value education so highly, is the reason why I am proud that we are looking to do as much good as we can with the dollars that we're spending. So motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you. My last item tonight is a request for approval of a second tentative agreement between the City of Portsmouth and the Portsmouth Public Library employees, Local 1386 of the AFSCME Council 93. And the highlights of their proposed tentative agreement would be a 3-year deal with COLA in year 1 at 2.84, and in years 2, 3 with a floor of 2 and a ceiling of 5%, and an increase by 1% each year in the health insurance contribution.
Your Honor, I move to approve the tentative agreement with the Portsmouth Public Library employees, Local 1386 of the AFSCME Council 93, as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you to HR Director Kelly Harper and our outside counsel, Tom Clausen, for working on that. Thank you.
Next up, we have the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, we have presentations and written communications. We have a letter from Robin Rousseau requesting the City Council considering creating zoning regulations regarding 5G cellular towers.
Your Honor, I move to refer to the Planning Board and Planning Department for a report back.
Second.
Any discussion?
Your Honor, I'll be voting against this. There is no established link between 5G and any safety concerns, and I value our staff's time, so I'll be voting against this.
I would, okay. We still have to do something, so we could, maybe an amendment to place on file would be prudent.
Your Honor, I would move to place on file.
Amend to place on file?
I would amend to place on file.
Kelly, is
That's
that
a
something
friendly
we can do?
amendment. I accept that as an amendment.
Okay.
And I accept too.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next up, we have a letter from Craig Welch, Executive Director, Portsmouth Housing Authority and PHA Housing Development Limited, requesting the waiver of permit fees for their project at the Christchurch Workforce Housing in Haven at 1035 Lafayette Road.
Your Honor, I'd move that we waive the permit fees as stated.
I'd second.
Any discussion? Councilor Bagley?
Your Honor, as I mentioned earlier during the budget discussion, and I'm disappointed that the fee total was not included for the first waiver request of $444,000, because I think that's a very significant number. And I'm disappointed that the fee waiver request of $142,000 is not included in this packet, and that there's nobody from PHA to speak on their behalf. As mentioned before, we're looking at a school board budget that would be reduced by exactly the amount of these fees that we're waiving for PHA. I think during the presentations of the different projects, we got a sense that some of the projects could happen without contributions from the city. $686,000 is a very significant taxpayer contribution, and I don't think it should be given away lightly.
Councilor Bagley, any other speakers? System Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. Respectfully, Councilor Bagley, I don't think it's giving away lightly. This city has historically waived fees for nonprofits, including PHA, and a good example is the North Church. We waived their fees for their the construction going on there. We've waived fees for numerous nonprofits. While I understand the concern is a revenue issue, I think that we can look for revenue outside of other fee negotiations and other revenue sources. While I understand that this is a lot within this 2 calendar years because of these 2 major projects that are going to happen. We haven't seen, if you equate these over the last 60 years that the PHA has had affordable and income-driven housing over in our community, I don't see it as a giant impact. While I agree with you that this year it is a large impact because we have 2 major projects, 2 projects that we have not seen the scale of for permanently below market and affordable housing. We've never seen the scale of these amount of units being built in our community. So I think when you take that into account, you can understand, well, I think a lot of the community and people on this council will support this motion.
We'll go, before we go to a back and forth, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it's really important to look at this project and to see the reality of the project. It's not just a housing project. It's a project to help build a permanent shelter in the city for women who are abused. And I think that that's really critical to remember. Haven is an organization that is going to have to raise millions of dollars to complete this project. It's not just a project that the PHA is building for housing. And so by charging them these fees, because part of those fees go to Haven as well, we are increasing the amount of money they have to raise to have a permanent women's shelter in Portsmouth. I, for one, think that is a critical service that we need in the city, and if the city had to provide it, it would cost us a significant amount of money. Right now, we have a nonprofit that provides that service in the city. And that nonprofit can't afford to stay in this city and continue to provide those services unless they have a project like this move forward. So I, for one, think it's really critical that the city supports this because it would cost us a lot more than $142,000.
Councilor Bagley.
Question for the city manager. Is it feasible to waive fees later on in the process? For instance, if these nonprofits can go out into the public sector, or not the public sector, the private sector, and raise funds, it's possible they would not need us to waive these fees? Or do they need to know that we're waiving the fees this early on in the process?
I don't, well, before, I think that we could waive fees, well, that would be maybe an attorney, or Attorney Morel question, if, like, when we can waive the fees, whether or not a nonprofit is going to be able to raise the money or not is outside the scope of, whether or not, but I think we could defer this letter to a date certain to accomplish that, if that was the wish of the council. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to just provide some feedback. Manny brought some great testimony up at the public hearing, and it was appropriate certainly for the public hearing. This is around the budget to discuss this. I don't remember ever voting against a nonprofit's fee waiver for building. I've been here for 6 years now. I don't recall one time when we haven't, and that goes back to previous councils. It goes back to, even with, there was some rocks, and we had to waive that for Court Street. I remember for the North Church, it's for the South Church, first council, the first time I waived a fee was for the slate roof fee, to waive the permit around that. Now, I think from a nonprofit, and you can have opinions on the PHA, you like them or not, but going back on just the tradition of having when nonprofits come here, we have very little leeway in terms of incentivizing anybody, but we try to incentivize nonprofits from doing projects because the permits, we're not going to charge them. Speaking to whether or not this is going to go directly into the school budget, if we were talking about using a capital expense for an operating one, I would have suggested that we take the money that we had left over from the Robert Lister Academy refit and added that in because it was the school department and comes right into the it would have come right into the operating budget. In fact, I might even suggested that to the city manager before I was told that by doing that, it doesn't actually lower our operating budget. It's a one-time, and we're going to be hit with that next year. And so while it's I'm happy to look at things in the capital improvement plan that we might reconsider given the investment that we've made in terms of a lack of revenue into these. I don't think the operating budget is the way that we should be able to do this. And given the fact that I have always voted to waive the fees of that nonprofits get from the city, knowing that we're on record pace for permits this year, and that when people ask what do we get from developers, well, we get a lot of permit fees, and how do we tilt the stack for nonprofits? Well, we don't charge them the same permit fees, whether it's a slate roof or whether or not it's a women's shelter and below market rate permanently affordable housing. And so I will be supporting this. I appreciate the conversation and for it brought to the attention. I do say that we should have had a more fully throated conversation at the last public hearing or the last conversation on that. And, for that, Manny, I really thank you for bringing this up today so that we could have this conversation today. It's good knowing what the city of Portsmouth is spending money on, and it's good knowing what we're not collecting revenue on, but I stand by not collecting revenue for nonprofits when we're looking to, for those to build their projects. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Next up, email correspondence.
I would move to accept and place on file, Your Honor.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up is appointments to be considered, and it's the reappointment of Celeste Brooks to the Cemetery Committee. Again, this is to be considered and not to be voted, but if you read it and you don't see any to be voted, you can almost be confused to think that we're voting tonight, but we aren't. So reach out with any questions, but we appreciate Celeste's desire to continue to serve. Next up, under City Council members, we have myself and the Assistant Mayor. I know there's a lot that's gone into it. This is just bringing back what the Parking Director has suggested as a path forward. So I will allow the Assistant Mayor to make this motion.
Your Honor, I move to amend Chapter 7, Article 3, Traffic Ordinance, Section 7.326, limited parking, 15 minutes, to amend the ordinance to convert 25 15-minute parking spaces to free 30-minute resident parking spaces in downtown metered parking areas, and to schedule a first reading at June 9th, 2025, City Council meeting.
Second.
Thank you. And if,
Any discussion?
yeah? Oh.
The Assistant Mayor and then Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Your Honor. This came about pretty organically when we were talking about kind of the utilization of downtown metered spots and the potential expansion of the resident parking program and kind of how that could happen. And in that meeting, it was kind of discussed, one of the big complaints I think that we receive on council, I know I do, is resident parking. So in conversation with the parking director, there were questions about the utilization of those 15-minute spots, and would it hurt us financially if we could potentially change those to 30-minute free resident parking. So the goal of bringing this forward at this time is to hopefully get it enacted for the summer season. And in further discussion with the parking director, we talked about potentially shifting some of those spots, whether it would make sense after a while, after kind of monitoring this, would it make sense to keep, say, those spots on Hanover or sprinkle those throughout different locations in the city. So I view this as a great thing for our residents. We often hear that people can't pop in and out of downtown. Yeah, I'm very excited about this, and I hope that there will be council and community support.
And we do have Ben Fletcher. Councilor Lombardi.
I have a couple questions just in the operation of it. I would say that I think this is a fantastic idea to do, but how will people use Park Mobile to be able to use it?
So I would say if it's possible to have
Ben come down.
And he's so educated on parking. I always want to call him Dr. Ben Fletcher.
The parking doctor.
Parking PhD. But Ben, maybe walk through how this would be rolled out, how it would be monitored, and what somebody would have to do in order to qualify for this.
Well, certainly. As we've discussed in the past, the tax office is now, when you register your vehicle, now gives you an application if you want one to apply for the Park Mobile discount. On our end, we're putting, whether they apply for that or not, we're putting every plate into our permit system. So when we go up to one of those spaces, we will tag the plate and say, hey, who has ABC 123? It'll say resident, and then we'll mark that vehicle for time. And if that vehicle is there longer than 30 minutes, well then, the next step would obviously be to cite the vehicle. But that is how we will know who's a resident, who's not a resident. And we're also planning on signing those individual spaces as resident only. So if a vehicle does not come up as a resident, well, then they would be eligible for a citation at that point.
The reason I asked is because I was thinking about half-hour parking is great. The advantage of Park Mobile is that it could remind you that your time is up as well. And I would hate to all of a sudden see residents getting tickets that are unexpected. And so I would also suggest that the enforcement to begin with be lenient and that until people get used to it, maybe a warning on a first offense or something like that, just to, because it's different. And I think it'll take some time for residents to know about it. The other piece is that I believe Park Mobile is at least developing or planning on developing open parking space information, and that might also be very advantageous for residents if they use the Park Mobile app for it. Are they still looking at doing that?
So to comment on, you made 3 points. One is that about payment. If we're not going to charge for the 30 minutes, then I would not anticipate to see anybody using those spaces engaging in a parking session. We would mark the time that we saw the vehicle at that point, and then 30 minutes thereafter, we would have the opportunity at that point to engage the vehicle. Secondly, to your second point, generally when we make changes that are large scope or global, we will write warning citations for a period of time. Generally, it's a couple of weeks, and people get the message. And finally, to your point on wayfinding, yes, I have engaged a wayfinding company with our Park Mobile vendor, and they have agreed to work together to help us with a predictive mapping of the city. It's pretty interesting technology. So we don't have devices at every space to tell us when a vehicle is actually there or not there, but what we can do is look over the last several years and predict at 6 p.m. in front of Bow Street restaurants what the availability might be, and you might guess in that example it's pretty low, but then also say what the recommendation would be, and then you can hit the directions button and take the directions to that location. It's pretty cool. So I'm still waiting on the development of that. We're looking to work with that company this summer before our smarking contract ends. And help, that will help me decide whether to extend that smarking contract or move over to this new group, which should provide us with the same kind of data that smarking does, but also engage Park Mobile for when people drive towards town. We could geofence a certain area, 10 miles, 30 miles, whatever it might be, and say, are you coming to Portsmouth? Click here for directions.
Thank you.
And so a part of this, and maybe speak to, we've had many conversations over the years on this. So this is not necessarily new, and I'm sure every counselor up here has had a similar conversation to some degree on how do we figure this out. And so this was a simpler and more elegant than I thought, because in terms of using the app, if you're in the app, we lose money when you start a session and it's less than if it was resident and it was 15 minutes and we wouldn't get past the credit card fees, and so we would lose the money to even do that. To even offer resident parking at the resident rate for 15 minutes with credit card fees, we lose money on that. So correct. At that point, trying to create the ability to use both the Park Mobile app and use 15-minute parking to try to encourage people to get in there. It didn't necessarily, it's tough to pull out the app and do that for, what would be, 30 cents or so. It doesn't clear the hurdle. And so I like this solution in terms of being able to deliver what a lot of people have asked for, certainly resident parking, but also being able to use the app for 15 minutes. Like, tourists might be able, or non-residents might be able to do that at some point if parking rates are high enough, but we're not going to be able to get the resident rate as long as we keep that low to do that. And so we can continue to give that benefit and then give something that the residents feel as though, although they earn $495 of taxes, paid for every year, this will provide for a more tangible benefit. Councilor Boak, then Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just one question for Ben. We said we're going to turn 25 15-minute parking spaces. Do you know how many other 15-minute parking spaces are downtown, or is that all of the 15-minute downtown?
That's in the downtown area that's metered, and
Yep.
that's
It
the
exists
area we're speaking of. There are a few others outside, so there's a few 2-hour spaces on Islington, so, for example, and I think clear down in the West End, there's some 15-minute spaces, but those wouldn't apply here.
Okay. And just
This would convert all 25 of the currently 15-minute metered spaces to the 30-minute free for residents.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And just one other point, kind of question. I know, a lot of these efforts, we're trying to give the residents a break and charge the non-resident, similar to like what Rye does with the beach. And I know we've been getting a lot more amenities in Portsmouth that do attract visitors, and not just downtown. Now we got the skate park, we got the turf fields, but something just to think about in the future, to think about some parking program where we give residents free parking there as well, and maybe we have some way of charging
Already
non-residents.
thinking about it.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so I will say that this was, as a part of the conversation, that we all as a council recommended to go back to the city manager to have the conversation on, a resident parking program. This is just the first iteration of that. I'm sure, being able to have, resident parking, separated from that, if we wanted to meter some areas. Councilor Cook, Councilor Denton, Councilor Bagler.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I commend you for this effort. I think it's important that we look for ways to support our residents. But I do have a question around parking availability. I can see this being a real benefit to residents, but I can also see a disadvantage to, say, restaurants that rely on a lot of takeout service, like, say, Moe's or Shalimar, where they have 15-minute spaces up front. What do we anticipate the impact will be on availability in turn on those spaces for people who use them for quick takeout?
Typically, the people that use the Moe's type spaces are locals. If somebody's coming up from Boston, they're probably already parked in their vacation parking, whether it's at the Sheraton or whatever hotel they might be at. The spaces are kind of underutilized anyway, so I don't think there's going to be a great degree of difference. Certainly after we would initiate this program, we could seek the counsel of the restaurant owners to see what they think and what their constituents are telling them.
Okay. And I guess one other follow-up question. What are we looking at as far as revenue loss on these metered spaces? If they're already underutilized, it must not be a lot, but...
But it's always significant. We have an inventory issue. We have a high demand and not enough inventory, which is why the discussion is underway to remedy that. So these spaces earn about 25% what normal spaces earn. So if you're talking about $8,000 or $9,000 for a high demand space, you're talking about $1,000 to $1,400 lost per. My estimation, just off the top of my head, would be $25,000 reduction in revenue.
Thank you.
Councilor Denton.
Thank you. My two questions were partially addressed. The first one was going to be about the local businesses, if they've been spoken to or if the chamber's been asked if this would be beneficial or not to the driver of downtown people visiting, both locals and just everyone parking downtown. So it sounds like they have not been engaged yet. And then my second question has to do with the basic principle of parking is turnover is a good thing. And I'm wondering what's anticipated for turnover if we go from 15 minutes to 30 minutes.
So to answer your first question, I don't know how much engagement there has been. I will reiterate my point that most of the users of these spaces are locals. So I would assume without the opportunity to collect data, that it would remain largely unchanged in terms of the usage. In terms of what the turnover would be, if we're going to limit it at 30 minutes, I would assume it would be somewhere around that time.
Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. I think we have a pretty well-functioning system as is, but in thinking about it over the weekend since seeing this proposal, it occurred to me that if we want to drive more residents downtown, that may be at the expense of available parking for people that are coming from out of town. But that's a decision we can make, thoughtfully as a council. The other thing that occurred to me is we have two classes of users who don't pay for their first 3 hours, and that's anybody with a handicap placard or anybody with a veteran plate, regardless if they live in New Hampshire, Maine, Florida, where have you. And I think it should at least be considered and maybe report back from the parking department, what would be the net effect of, instead of getting rid of these 15-minute spaces, which I've never been a fan of, and turning them into half-hour spaces, of giving residents somewhere between 1 and 3 hours free per day for parking downtown.
Is that a question?
No, a report back, not a report back. I think it's a loaded question, so it's a complicated one.
I'm happy to hear that, Councilor Bagley, you're not a fan of the 15-minute spaces just in general. So, we have a shot here. Good idea, or one worth considering if we would like to go to a different system. Ben, any off the top of your head thoughts on if we waive the first or 3 hours on any resident parking downtown?
Yeah, to reiterate our discussion earlier, I think last week, when you are engaging a garage, you're required to pull a ticket. That tells you when you came in. It tells us when you came in. Everybody gets 15 minutes free in the garage. And when they leave, they say, this is how long we've been here. When somebody is querying a plate on the road, though, they come around the corner, there's no way to know how long that car's been there. So there's no starting or ending time when somebody parks in a space that doesn't have a gate or other kind of mechanism. So without installing, I did some research on this, without installing some devices, which in the future might be helpful, but right now would only tell us whether a vehicle is in a space or not, you're looking at about $800,000 and about $500,000 a year to run that system, where obviously now we would have no install costs for the current system we have in place because it's already in. And we run about $80,000 a year on our software and hardware costs. So until the state legislature looks towards allowing license plate recognition, LPR technology, for commercial use, it doesn't seem feasible to put a device between each of the spaces to tell us whether a car's there or not, how long it's been there.
Would it be possible in the Park Mobile system, though?
Park Mobile can't know when a vehicle places into spot X on Hanover Street.
Oh, I think what Councilor Bagley was asking is if, regardless of the 15-minute spots or not, the first 3 hours would be waived as a part of the, or the first hour.
Some increment.
Some increment would be waived in the
General parking distribution area.
Yes, the general parking distribution.
Right, but there's no way to know when that time starts. So if you say 1 hour, you say 2 hours, you say 15 minutes, there's no way to know when that time starts. In the current situation, when if we change these spaces from 15 to 30, we will walk to that car, we will punch in the plate. If it says resident, if it doesn't say resident, we'll cite them immediately because it's resident only. If it says resident, then we can only mark the time then. They might have already been there an hour, but we can only mark that time then when we see the vehicle. So without a distinct in and out time, there's no way to know how much to give somebody. And everybody's always going to be 3 minutes under whatever that limit is.
So I just want to be clear, Andrew, or Councilor Bagley, are you asking if in the app, when they load the parking onto the app, when they load it, the first set of time is not charged, the parking rate goes to 0 for that first hour, and then whatever hour after that is charged at the regular amount of time?
Yeah, so right now for a resident that has a plate in the system, instead of getting charged $2 per hour, I believe they get charged $1.25. What I'd be proposing is they get charged $0 for that first hour.
And so then we would be losing it on the credit card fees, so the first for the first, if they stayed for just 1 hour. So, maybe it's 30 minutes so that, we encourage them to stay for an hour, but like we would, like, that's where, that's the.
The idea being driving the behavior of residents to the downtown and disregarding the financial impact if it's not too severe.
Okay, and so do we know, like, what what the financial impact on the first hour of parking for, residents would be if we implemented such a system?
I would have to go back and try to calculate that. We're running about $4 per transaction. The issue with Councilor Bagley's suggestion is that what we found in the past, or what I've found in the past in my 30-some years doing this in other cities, is the residents simply won't engage the session. They won't start the timer. When you pull into the garage, you start the timer because if you want in, you have to have the ticket to get in, and then the gate will open and you go in. Then they won't engage the timer, and then they'll look out the window and they'll see when our person comes around the road. We actually have this happen. It's very common, but I can come up with a figure for you. But it's with our current technology in place, it is not feasible to suggest that any piece of the puzzle be free up front. What we do have now is a 75-cent reduction, which is equivalent to 22.5 minutes every hour.
So we're happy to provide that report back information.
Councilor Blaylock?
No, I'm good.
Your Honor.
System
Ben, just a quick question as we talk about some of the spots for businesses. And as we all know, I own a business downtown, and I actually happen to be working there Sunday and talking to local residents about this and trying to get their feedback. And many people felt very excited. But do you know how many of the spaces downtown have been requested by businesses to have a 15-minute spot in front of them?
I don't know the history of that. I know that, I inherited most of what's on the map right now. We made some changes over time. I'm not in favor of increasing the population of that space. Maybe we can move some things around, simply because we have an inventory issue at this point and don't have enough for the demand we have. Those spaces typically are underutilized and definitely underpaid. So it's not the highest and best use, which is what you look for any property, whether it's a residential, whether it's a business, or whether it's parking. You look for highest and best use. And the 15s in our situation are not the highest and best use.
Okay.
But we could certainly look at moving them around if we want.
I would ask if we could get a report back on you and your staff and your department's recommendation of kind of best placements of these, because I think of on Hanover Street across from the garage, in front of like the juicery, there's 5 or 4 15-minute parking spaces, which now would be turned over. So I would look at your recommendation of placements within these downtown locations that may be better utilized.
Well, they're fairly well scattered.
Okay.
I agree that the cluster of 5 there is probably not as logical as maybe it was when it was implemented. We probably drop a few of those off and turn them into regular spaces for users that might have, interest in the area outside of stopping by the Superior Juicery. But I, would defer to, people's thoughts on that.
What we can do as part of the report back is provide the map of the spots that currently exist.
Thank you.
So all of these, just the 15-minute spaces, most of them have meters?
They all have meters.
Or coins.
They all have coins.
Correct.
Okay. So what would be could we continue on, I guess when originally was talking about it, we were going to continue on the 15-minute spaces for people popping in non-residents, and that way, the businesses aren't impacted if they feel as though they would be. And then we have the 30-minute apply. Could that all fit on a sign without making your life super hard? 15-minute space or, resident parking program.
Typically, the more information on a sign, the more misread it is. So you want to be as simple as possible on your signage. I think if we make this move, it should read resident only, and that should be what we hold with. I think by and large, the people that use the 15-minute spaces are residents. I really do.
Councilor
I guess my only concern in saying resident only, I don't want our entire city of residents to think it's downtown residential only. So could it say Portsmouth residential only? Just because that way I feel like it would be more inclusive of everyone that's
I think
outside the
we-
downtown.
We discussed, just Portsmouth resident.
But not Chicago.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? So this is first reading. Request for first reading, which will happen at the next council meeting. Has this,
I would maybe make a second request for the city manager to maybe have our director of economic development touch base with the chamber,
Yep, you got it.
just for a report back.
and has this made it to, Andy, when's the next, or Councilor Bagley, when's the next PTS meeting?
June.
June, first Thursday in June, Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday.
The 5th, June 5th.
When is our next?
The 9th.
The 9th.
The
So
9th
should we-
would be the
we can-
first, so could we have a?
Refer out.
A refer out to PTS as well?
Man.
You may, all right. Would that be, so could, we'll have maybe we just send it to EDC and PTS as a part of scheduling first reading?
Great.
Okay.
All right. That wasn't a motion.
That is
so-
my amended motion.
Oh, that's your, you're making it easy on.
Second that as
All right.
the second.
Okay. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Any further discussion? Vote to schedule first reading, vote to, and send to the EDC and to
PTS.
PTS concurrently. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next up, Counselor Bagley.
And Your Honor, I'm going to pretend to be Councilor Bagley. I'm going to take this one from him.
I have to recuse.
So just to add action item needing approval from the City Council, and this came from Park and Traffic and Safety. But the Hanover Street Valet License Hunter Club, I move to approve the annual renewer of Valet License for the 100 Club.
Second?
And I'll just say this is only from 5 p.m. to midnight in the loading zone in front of the 100 Club building there. Loading zones, they don't get really used after 5 p.m., so I don't see an issue here.
Used to be my favorite free parking.
Yeah, it is, that's the resident parking program right now, is knowing that you can park there before anybody else, and you use the Park Mobile.
Used to be able to park there free.
Yep. All right, let's see, now we're back to, we have all, yep, so we have that, and who seconded?
I seconded.
Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Recuse.
And any abstentions? All right, now, next up is,
Your Honor, I move to approve change in loading zone hours from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday to 6 a.m. to 11 a.m., Monday through Saturday at the Brewster Street loading zone.
Second?
And just to speak briefly to it, this was a request from the business owner. It works well for everybody, so seems like a great idea.
Great.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And two, the Parking Traffic Safety Committee action sheet minutes of the May 1st, 2025 meeting. I move to approve and accept the action sheet and minutes of the May 1st, 2025 Parking Traffic and Safety Committee meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Anything to call out in that?
I think it was just the two items that we just approved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, acceptance of the donation to the police department from Gino's Chowder and Sandwich Shop in the amount of $250.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, the acceptance of donation for the police department from Ms. Gail Frangillo in the amount of $30.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? City Manager.
Thank you. I have two quick informational items. The first is a master plan update. We have, as you know, recently executed a contract with planning and design firm Utile, and that firm is coming quickly up to speed with all the plans that we've done recently, and they're able to incorporate that into their existing conditions and understanding of the city. And as part of contracting with UTIL, they specifically directed us to identify a local trusted resource to serve as outreach coordinator with whom UTIL would contract. And Ann Weidman, who's known by many people as the spearhead for Access Navigators, is going to contract with UTL to serve in that outreach coordinator capacity. We're excited about that. So we're currently in the stages of forming a steering committee, which will start to meet in June, and we'll meet 6 times throughout the process. And the large public meeting, number 1, is going to be worked on all summer and planned for early September, so as not to catch people off on vacation. And exciting news, as of about 5:59 this evening, the website's been updated to have a dedicated 2035 master plan update, or the current master plan update, whatever we decide to call it. So that's the master plan update, and Councilor Bagley stole my thunder. We received our...
What a meaning.
You know. Mean. We received, the staff deserves a lot of praise for earning the 13th affirmation of our AAA bond rating. And what that means, because I asked the folks in finance to help me understand what that means, the value of having AAA versus AA is a difference in the bond issuance we're going out with this week of $410 over the life of the bond. And if the interest rate was single A,
410,000.
410, what did I say?
$410.
410,000.
Big difference. Parking covers more than that. Why are we working so hard for a AAA?
So that difference is almost 4%, and if it were a single A rating, the difference would be 9%, or $990,000. So it is worth a great deal of savings to the taxpayer. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilor Bagley.
And this is
under miscellaneous, which we now have.
My favorite announcement of the year is when we get our AAA bond rating. I think it probably wasn't unnoticed by those that follow the financial markets that Moody's just downgraded the U.S. sovereign debt from AAA to AA plus. So now we are ahead of the federal government in our bond rating by all 3 rating agencies. And we're in a fairly exclusive club among municipalities.
That's a lot scary.
Great job, again, City Manager, and to everybody that makes that happen. Anything under miscellaneous?
City manager for president.
Oh my goodness. I can't even add.
I made a motion to adjourn. I have one. Is there a second?
So moved.
Good night, Portsmouth.